Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
Hello, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Eric.
And this is 6 Degrees of Schwarzenegger, the podcast where we take a long, hard look back at some of our favorite action movies from the era of Arnold.
Schwarzenegger is the icon of the genre, and we're taking a deep dive into some of these 80s and 90s cult action movies, breaking them all the way down.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, Kevin. We're back. We're still here. We're still doing it.
We've survived this far.
It moves at a snappy pace. Like, the movie is clipping up here.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little more about Last Action Hero. No, Last Boy Scout.
That's 2 in a row, man.
That's 2 in a row,
You really
man.
want to watch Last Action Hero
The old
again.
fashions have taken hold.
I know.
No, we're going to talk about The Last Boy Scout. I feel like it's almost an unofficial Die Hard movie.
It is.
I feel
It
like
really
there's
is.
not a big difference between the character of Joe and the character of John McClane.
Well, I mean, even if you're thinking about like Die Hard with a Vengeance with Zeus,
Yeah.
right? Like this kind of guy, just a cab driver who gets wrapped up into something much bigger than he was, thought he was going to be a part of.
And then Bruce Willis is like the hungover, like
Yeah.
bad mood,
yeah, I
I'm
mean,
grumpy, whatever. Yeah,
he had a hangover for all of Die Hard with a Vengeance,
Absolutely.
right? So yeah,
but I love it, man.
yeah, I'm here for it. I
I'm
love
having
it.
a good time with it.
Yeah, this is a good flick. I was surprised at how much I liked it, and this is, I think, one of Shane Black's
It's
better
aged
efforts.
well, I
yeah,
think.
it really has. Aside from a few '90s sort of era
Fair.
things like the chain smoking and sort of the mandatory homophobia of the era.
I suppose there are still chain smokers out there.
Yeah, but they're few
Who
and
can
far
afford
between.
that?
I know. I mean, cigarettes are so expensive now.
Yeah, man.
And
I
now-
want to say that vending machine was like $2 or something for a pack. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, I mean, probably $8 depending on where you are.
Yeah, man, crazy.
I mean, like now Joe would just be like hitting on a vape constantly.
Oh, that'd be annoying. Douchebag.
Totally different vibe.
Do you think you can try to recap us on the plot?
We're gonna give us a shot. All right. So the movie opens with a Friday night is football night song. I couldn't sing you a single one of the lyrics, but it opens at a very rainy game in Cleveland where a football star has been called on the phone by an evil villain named Milo. Says you need to start scoring some touchdowns. So
Or else.
Never explain what else is, but it's ominous. So he gets on the field and he's so panicked and terrified of this guy. He pulls a gun, murders a couple of the defense players in an attempt to get a touchdown. Then we cut to Joe, our hero, asleep in his car, where a couple of kids drop a dead squirrel on his sleeping body.
Dead Squirrel made the recap.
Oh my God! Hell yeah!
You're
it
going
did.
in depth.
I'm going to go as fast as possible. But anyway, just paint a picture that he's a loser PI. He gets a call from his buddy when he's back in the office. Says, "Hey, I have a job for you. Do you want it?" And he says, "Sure." So he goes back to his friend's house or to his own home to find his friend is fucking his wife.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
So anyway, in the meantime, and I don't remember what order this happens in, we meet Jimmy as well, who's a disgraced football player, waking up in a strange mansion next to a sleeping young woman, and he does a bunch of drugs in the bathroom. So,
True.
So
His two passions are
his two passions: football
fucking women and doing drugs.
Football isn't one of them anymore. So anyway, so Joe and Mike have it out a little bit when Joe discovers that Mike is fucking his wife. Mike, they part ways, not friends anymore, but at least Joe's still going to take the job. Mike gets in his car. The car explodes. Mike is deader than a doornail, very dead. Joe and his wife Sarah have it out a little bit on the front porch while cops are milling about everywhere, which establishes the relationship a little bit later. Joe then proceeds to head to a strip club, which is where the job is, and the job is Corey, a stripper, who turns out is also fucking Jimmy, who also now happens to be in the strip club at the same time.
Finally, worlds are colliding.
That's right. So while Corey is doing a little dance for the fellas, Jimmy confronts Joe, tells him he's a loser, bunch of Shane Black, witty banter back and forth. Joe heads outside after Jimmy pulls Corey off the stage. He's accosted by a bunch of goons. He gets the better of one of the goons by telling silly jokes. A brief car chase ensues. Corey winds up dead. Jimmy and Joe wind up at the police station. 2 senior police officers are suspicious of it all, but nonetheless let them go free. Joe and Jimmy have more banter, get in a car, and now they're heading off to Corey's apartment to continue their investigation.
Dude, that was incredible.
I
feel like you're right on the edge. The high noons that you're drinking are working like at peak efficiency. One more and that would have gone fully off the rails, but instead it was like the most succinct and in-depth recap we've ever had.
Let's see how we do when we get to part 5.
Yeah, no, I'm going to warn you. My recap on the next episode ain't going to be all that.
I'm getting there.
Yeah. So Joe and Jimmy, they arrive at the apartments, these like swanky apartments on Melrose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or whatever. So Joe asks, how could she ever afford this place?
The question we were sort of asking about her cars.
Though I imagine a successful stripper makes a lot of money.
I have honestly no idea. I don't know what the economics of stripping are.
But Jimmy says, well, I paid the rent, which Joe starts making fun of. Oh, do you pay for cars? Do you pay for this? That?
Yeah.
And Jimmy's like, no. We really were in love, which Joe then scoffs at. And Jimmy is like, oh, so you don't believe in love? And he's like, yeah, I believe in love. I also believe in cancer. And Jimmy's like, well, they're both diseases. And he's like, yeah, something like that. And that is when Jimmy says that one of the best lines of the movie, which is like, I want to meet the bitch that fucked you up.
Man, what a line. What a line.
Joe has a grim outlook on life, and I do think it's because, he's been hurt.
Yeah.
But I want to meet the bitch that fucked you up.
Oh, man. I mean, again, going back to what we know about where this script came from originally, there is a lot of Shane Black in this movie.
It makes you wonder, how bad was this breakup?
I know. Whew, man. Anyway.
But yeah, so they arrive at the front door, and Joe tells Jimmy, okay, go ahead and, get us inside of this security system, you were talking about before. And Jimmy just kicks the door open, revealing, I guess there was no security alarm, whatever at all. And Joe tells Jimmy, okay, well, let's not fuck the place up because presumably the cops will come around at some point to search this place.
Yeah.
So they walk in, though, and find the place has already been ransacked. And I just I see ransacked apartments. I'm like, it would be fun to really just fuck a place up one time in your life,
Oh, that would be. I mean, you've seen those rage rooms.
Yeah.
I want to do one of those once. Not because I'm actually angry, just to break things for a while.
I know. Flip everything over.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
That seems anyway.
But, so Joe sweeps through the apartment to make sure it's clear. Jimmy is looking at all these photos of him and Corey that are strewn all about the apartment, and he sits down on the bed and he's crying. I feel like it's the reality is finally hitting him. Oh, she's dead now, Yeah. So Joe brings in a picture and he's like, who is this guy with Corey in the picture? And Jimmy is like, that's the owner of the Stallions, Shelly Marcone. He says Corey, dated him briefly, but he was treated her like shit, so she left.
Dated him.
Right.
I feel like nobody dates those big fat.
Right. I dated a billionaire 50 years older than me.
Right. It seems like a weird word to use. I think we need to come up with a different word to explain that relationship. But
also, I would say in 2024, NFL team owners are celebrities in their own right.
Yeah.
That might have been different in 1991, but it seems like Joe was a football fan.
Right.
So for him not to know what the owner of the team looks like, it was a little strange. But again, I chalked that up to 91. Might have been a different
And
world.
also, they needed that moment of exposition.
Of course,
So they needed someone to ask that question, right?
So then Jimmy says, I'm going to go use the bathroom. But then we see that he's actually in there searching for something. And he finds this hollow can, a big can of hairspray or something or another.
Yeah.
It's got a baggie in it of drugs and other shit. I feel like that was whatever it was that Dennis Nedry had in Jurassic Park that was similar.
The shaving cream.
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, the real motive for Jimmy to be in the apartment. He was looking for some more drugs. So, but yeah, there's also a cassette tape in there. And there's an envelope with some pictures and some papers. So Jimmy finds Joe smoking, surprise.
I mean, surprise, surprise.
Outside on the patio. And he shows Joe what he found. And yeah, dude's never like not smoking. I feel like you can't make movies like that anymore, right? Is there like a rule about that? Or
I
is it
just don't think
studios
I think just
saying-
it's gauche. I mean, like I just think that people don't do it anymore, right? And it's I don't know that
if
there's
you're,
an actual
if you're
rule.
Quentin Tarantino, you could do anything you want.
Right.
But I do feel like if you're making a Marvel movie, you're like, no, Captain America doesn't smoke cigarettes.
I suspect that in the MCU, cigarettes don't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, like as a concept, no one considered inventing cigarettes.
But so basically, the pictures he has show the Stallions owner, Marcone, and Senator Baynard walking and talking. Now, somehow Jimmy doesn't recognize the senator,
Right.
which also
is,
seems strange.
His picture's everywhere. I mean, we saw a giant billboard
I feel
earlier.
like maybe that's possible. You don't know what the senator in your state looks like?
I mean, I have
if you're
friends,
Jimmy, maybe you don't know?
Yeah, I mean, I have friends who are aggressively apolitical, right? And so if you are one of these people like, no, I hate politics, I hate all of it, and you go out of your way to avoid it, I could see that actually.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So there's also a phone bill in there that shows a lot of calls from Marcone to Baynard's home. And then Jimmy's like, you know the senator's home number? He's like, yeah, I called him a couple times. Shut the fuck up. That made Jimmy laugh. It was a nice payoff. And the two, like you said before, they had like really good chemistry.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis and David Wayans. So Jimmy then asks, well, what does this all add up to? And Joe says, it looks like we got enough blackmail here, like that Marcone and Baynard, whatever, we could send them up to jail for a long time. So Joe says Corey basically, she must have seen something, heard something while she was dating Marcone. And hired Mike to gather evidence to blackmail him.
Yeah.
And Jimmy got real bent out of shape when Joe said that she was fucking Marcone. Like you said, though, I mean, yeah, but she was fucking him, though. I mean, or at least, if he could even get it up.
Right. I mean, like, yeah, because this is pre-Viagra at this point.
Pre-Viagra world. So Jimmy is delighted that they found the evidence. Like, good, we can fuck him up too. And Joe's like, oh, yeah, we got him by the nuts now. And that is why I love America. He says. So they get in the car, and Jimmy pops that tape. Cassette tapes is like just a total blast from the past, right?
I know.
He pops the tape into Joe's tape deck, and it's a phone call between Baynard and Marcone. And Senator Baynard seems nervous, and Marcone is teasing him like, yo, you sound like you're like doing something shady. And Baynard says, you know, there's no law about contemplating. And Jimmy's like, this is boring, and his fast forward. And Joe's like, no, don't press fast forward. It's the tape. To me, that was an incredible moment to me because there's something just that felt really real to me. I don't know how you felt about it.
No. It felt completely natural, right?
No, fast forward. It's the tape.
I mean, we've all driven
had a
cars.
shitty car. Yeah.
I mean, I've driven cars where like the tape deck was. Oh, I mean, you might have had that exact same problem.
Fast forward.
Yeah.
I know that. You don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that like it needed to be established earlier or if this works on its own.
For me, it worked on its own.
Like, because it's a piece of shit car.
It's a piece of shit car, right? Yeah.
No, fast forward is the tape.
And then, anybody who's driven a piece of shit car like that knows that there's something wrong with the tape deck.
Yeah. It's hilarious, though, as Joe, like, pulls the tape out and it's just like,
It's a
trailing
string.
this, like, long line. We've all been there. I feel like anyone from our age group.
Yeah.
Is like, you get the little pencil and you,
You just have to
pull the
roll it
tape
back in.
Although Joe seems like resigned to the fact the tape is just ruined. There's no way it's like ruined.
You could take it to the police station right now.
Even if it damaged like a little stretch
you
of the
cut
tape.
that out and
you cut that out. Yeah, you can still hear what was on it. You just need to take it to a professional.
Yeah, exactly.
But Jimmy's like, you know, this must have been the birthday present that Corey was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And he explains basically Corey wasn't trying to blackmail him. Or not for money, but she was going to help me get my job back, like get me back in the league or whatever. So then Jimmy's like, it's my fault she's dead. And like gets reeled down and says, you know, I'm going to go home.
Yeah.
And I understand the guilt of it all, but like this is really not his fault at all.
No, it really is. I mean, he didn't ask her to
know
do
anything
of
about that any of this was happening, right? So Joe tells Jimmy, well, I'll give you a ride. And Jimmy's like, no, don't worry. I'll take care of Corey's other car. So he walks off. And Joe like realizes, wait, Corey had 2 cars? Mm-hmm. So then we see Jimmy getting into this classic fucking Mustang. Like, she had sweet cars, man.
Car. I know.
So Joe speeds over and he's yelling at Jimmy, get out of the car. And like Joe had that old piece of shit running good because it was like laying wheel, like burning out, coming around the corner.
Coming in on that.
Yeah, it was awesome. They find under the hood, there's a block of C4. And Joe disconnects the bomb, says, we could take this to the police to have it analyzed. I have no idea what that means.
Nope. Not maybe for fingerprints? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I do feel like in some world you could like have this prove that this C4 matches the C4 that was part of Mike's bombing.
I mean, maybe.
I don't know that 91 LAPD have that level of sophistication.
It'll be a guy in a lab coat going, yep, that's C4.
That's C4, all right. Yeah, I don't know. But then they walk back over to the car, and there was that funny moment where Jimmy is like, you're just going to put that in the trunk? And Joe's like, no, maybe we should just leave it out for the neighborhood kids to play with.
Which comes back in Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yeah, that was total Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yeah.
Now, Joe then pops the trunk open, but he notices these 2 suspicious-looking fuckers approaching him.
Yeah.
So he sticks the C4 like right next to the latch of the trunk and closes the trunk up. So there's this smaller guy and a big guy. They come up. They approach him. They disarm Joe. Joe and Jimmy have like wise ass remarks for him or whatever. And one guy's like, shut up, fuckface. He's like, no, I'm fuckface. He's asshole.
It's just great.
So the smaller guy tells the big guy to smack him around a little bit. And then the small guy wants to know what they find in Corey's apartment. And they're like smart ass with him again. He's like, it's like, oh, we're dealing with a couple geniuses here. Smack him around a little bit more, the big guy. Joe in particular is taking a lot of beatings in this movie, isn't he?
Yeah, he really gets the shit kicked out of him a lot.
So the smaller guy, he keeps using these like big vocabulary words.
I love this line.
And Jimmy made the great joke about like, because he's like, he had said like, now here's a man who knows when a situation is untenable. And he's like, oh yeah, he attacks his job with a certain exuberance, doesn't he? And he's like, oh, we're getting beat up by the inventor of Scrabble. But basically, then Joe's like, no, we know you want the envelope the hooker had, and like Jimmy's like, she's not a hooker, and it's just like, so. I mean, Jimmy, I think cared about her, right? He's like very defensive.
Yeah.
But so Joe says, the evidence you were looking for, it's in the trunk. So they say, okay, give us the keys. And Joe produces the keys, but then he chucks them off into the darkness. He's like, oops. It's another Die Hard thing where he's like, oops, no bullets.
No bullets. Yeah.
So now the small guy is like, okay, open the trunk up to the big guy. The big guy cocks his gun. And then Joe gives Jimmy a little glance. And when the guy pulls the trigger, Joe grabs Jimmy and they jump off like over this retaining wall and go rolling off down a hill. Because, the shot explodes the C4. Another massive explosion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Killed the 2 bad guys. The car like flipped up over the retaining wall and it's coming rolling down the hill. And there, like, it was a great stunt with that explosion. Like, the dudes jumping off right as it was blown up, that was real. And there was the bad guys were like a couple of mannequins.
Yeah.
I paused it. They're like very like wooden, But Joe and Jimmy, they scramble out of the way as the car rolls towards them. They can't believe they survived. We got more approaching sirens. Joe tells Jimmy, you go on and get out of here. I'll take the heat with the police or whatever. So later on at the police station, that same lieutenant, he's yelling at Joe again. The lieutenant works apparently 24 hours a day.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, there is no shifts for him.
Yeah, he's there whenever the shit's popping off. So the lieutenant is telling Joe, this is a police investigation. You stay the fuck out of it. Which actually is totally justified.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
But they probably could legitimately have arrested him.
For interfering with a police investigation. Yeah.
But he threatens like, I'm going to fucking kill you if you're involved in this shit again. Which that also seems like it's a misconduct, So the lieutenant leaves and the underling is still hanging around in there. He says he wants to shake Joe's hand. He tells him, they told me how you saved the president. I want to pay my respects. who the fuck is this guy?
I have no idea.
Like, what is his rank?
I don't know. He is just cop number 2, so that senior cop can have a moment of exposition later on. And also this moment too, like emphasizing that Joe is in fact a hero in some circles, right?
This character definitely didn't have a name.
No, there's no way. This is just cop 2. Like that is what his name is in the script.
So Joe's leaving, and outside the police station, Joe finds Jimmy's out there waiting for him. This is the point that you had pointed out that he was literally chain smoking because he literally had the one cigarette butt that he used to light the next cigarette.
One? Yeah.
Crazy shit.
This is awesome.
Jimmy's got another new car that he's driving. But it's kind of shitty. It was like a little Pontiac convertible, like a Pontiac Sunfire or some shit like that. So Jimmy says, since we lost our evidence, we better go get some more evidence. Joe tells Jimmy, you should let it go. But Jimmy says, we can't let Corey's death slide, whatever. And he says that thing, they're off at Spago eating chicken marsala. And then Joe had that line about, and reindeer goat cheese pizza, which is apparently a line that was exactly from Hudson Hawk as well.
Okay.
I don't know Hudson Hawk that well.
I don't remember that line, but that seems like a line that would be in Hudson Hawk.
Reindeer goat cheese pizza.
I will say that doesn't sound bad. I mean, I've had elk.
I've never eaten reindeer. Well, I guess reindeer and caribou are like the same thing.
Yeah, reindeer, elk, caribou.
It's essentially an elk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So elk's really good.
I've had elk burger before, like in Wyoming, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I had it in Pacific Northwest, and it's surprisingly good.
Yeah, very good. Anyway,
side note.
Sorry. So check out the food podcast.
Or we moonlight as a food podcast. Anyway.
So Joe tells Jimmy, this is no game, but Jimmy says, I accept the risk. He said, like, this is dangerous. And he says, well, dangerous is my middle name. And that's where Joe's like, mine's Cornelius.
Tell anyone. Don't fucking kill you.
Don't tell anyone. So Joe says, okay. He asked Jimmy, well, take me back to my house. We'll resume the search or whatever in the morning. Now, later on, they're driving back to Joe's house. Jimmy is like marveling at the fact that Joe has a family. And Joe confesses, things haven't been great on the home front lately. They're finally starting to bond, it seems like. Mm-hmm. They were also driving through that famous tunnel in LA that's like in so many movies, the one with it's all tiles and it's kind of reflective. It's been in like dozens of movie credits. I looked it up, but I think of it as like the Terminator, the chase at the end of the Terminator definitely goes through that tunnel. Yep. So they pull up to Joe's house. Jimmy sort of can't believe you like actually live in a normal house. Whatever. He's like, I thought you were like in a cave with skulls and shit. So they briefly have this very inconsequential conversation about Jimmy riding horses.
Yeah. which
I feel like it's like teeing up something that happens later in the movie, but it really was unnecessary.
It felt completely out of the blue for the moment.
Shoehorned in.
Yeah. Because it is relevant later on, but also highly unnecessary.
Yeah, you really didn't need this.
Right.
So Jimmy insinuates, your daughter might like me. And Joe's like, if you even look at my daughter funny, I'll stick an umbrella up your ass and open it. They're finally... Oh, and Jimmy finally takes his hat off.
Yeah.
We're at the midway point of the movie, and Jimmy's taking off that weird little like Black Panther Santa hat that he's been wearing.
You really loved that hat. You really loved that hat.
Yeah, they were getting a lot of mileage out of that shit. So... Now, inside, they find Darian, the daughter, watching an action movie in his fucking lethal weapon. It's a huge Easter egg because it's another Joel Silver and Shane Black movie.
Yep.
I feel like this is the first time we've heard a lot about Darian, but this is the first time we're seeing her.
Yeah, that's right.
And she's got the furry Tom puppet that she's like using it to avoid talking to her dad. And then she lightens up when she sees that Joe's like beat to shit, basically, right? And then Joe's an asshole to her.
Right.
He's like, no, my face always looks like this. And she asked Jimmy, like, what's wrong with his face? And he's like, his nose is too pointy. So his eyes are beady. His ears are big. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was a pretty great moment.
So Jimmy is trying to make nice with Darian, but she gives some shit about the number on the back of his head. She's like, what is that, like a license plate in case someone tries to steal it?
She is like the daughter version of Shane Black. Every line of dialogue out of her mouth. She's just in a
bad hungover type mood.
I know. I mean, it's just like, this is, I think, if Shane Black ever had a daughter, this is who he would want her to be.
So he's like, I'm gonna leave you alone now. Now, I also noticed at this point the number on his head looked like hair because it was like
because it was puffy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Jimmy says, "Yeah, I'll leave you alone." Joe is in the kitchen. He's making up an ice pack for his head, and Darian he asked Darian if she wants some ice cream, and she basically tells him to fuck off, kick rocks, Dad. And then he says he tells Jimmy she's mad because I wouldn't let her go to a party with the boy. And Joe is alternating between like trying to be peaceful and like and being a total asshole to her.
Right,
it's
really,
kind of shitty.
Yeah, he really can't figure out where he's landing with his daughter. But
it's kind of crazy. He's like, "Do you want the ice cream?" And he's like, "It's chocolate chip. It's your favorite." And like, first of all, chocolate chip is no one's favorite.
No one's favorite ice cream.
That's like the shittiest. I'd rather have plain vanilla.
I know. Say,
like, I want the fudge swirl. It's like chocolate chips in there. That ain't it. That's bullshit. That's bad writing, Shane Black. Calling you out. Okay? No, but then Darian's like, "You're an asshole." And he goes and he chucks the ice cream out out the back door or whatever. And then Joe challenges Darian like, "Why don't you step up the verbal abuse?" He's like, "Come on, I hardly ever hear asshole." And she's like, "Bullshit, I bet you hear it all the time." I thought that was hilarious, actually.
Yeah.
The kid's like the foulest mouthed kid I've ever seen in a movie.
I know. So apparently the woman who played her, I mean the young girl who played her at the time, she's to this day in interviews will say that was the favorite role she's ever had, and I 100% believe it.
Absolutely.
As a kid, getting to say all of those words and not get in trouble for it.
She made she made a Ward. She's like, he thinks he's Ward Cleaver. It's like, ain't no 13-year-old in the 90s making Leave It to Beaver jokes.
No, not a chance in hell.
I know that Leave It to Beaver was a thing. I don't know anything. I know the Beav was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I presume the dad was like this sort of Dudley Do-Right type.
Yeah.
Upstanding American father, like probably had a pipe in his mouth.
Yeah.
Son, let me teach you a lesson here.
I grew up watching Nick at Night, so I've seen.
You've seen Leave It to Beaver.
I've seen Leave It to Beaver.
Okay,
and it is
never
really an artifact of the 50s. It is completely unwatchable unless you are taking a class on either anthropology of human life in the 1950s or a history of television.
I used to fuck with some Nick at Night, but I watched there was a lot of Mr. Ed and a lot of Dennis the Menace and a lot of Lassie.
Yeah. And there are some good shows in that era, and Nick at Night was great, but Leave It to Beaver was not one of those.
Okay, but it was iconic.
It's iconic, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Joe tells her, "You got a trash mouth just like your mother." And Jimmy tells Joe, "Why don't you lighten up?" And Joe tells Jimmy, "Mind your own damn business." I don't know. What are you doing if you're Jimmy in this situation? I just want to be not in this house anymore.
I have been at people's places where they're getting into arguments with their children, and I just sort of, the Homer meme where he just sort of backs into the hedges. Like, that's what I do. I just back into the hedges.
Right now.
Just do not want to be here.
Yeah. So Darian calls Joe a fuck up, which really makes Joe mad.
Yeah.
He goes in this rant like about who said I was a fuck up, and he's like, "Mom." He's like, "Who'd she tell it to?" And he's like, "Uncle Jay."
That's
it's
right.
This rant. He goes on a rant about the never mentioned again or seen Uncle Jay, which I can only assume it's Jay Leno. I think it has to be. No, she's like, "Oh, Uncle Jay's a stand-up guy. Okay. He's fucking cheating on his taxes." It was like a weird rant.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Why don't you ask your mom why Uncle Jay's not in jail?" And that's why Darian's like, "Because he doesn't fuck up." Which was a good line.
That's a good line.
So the family squabble continues until Sarah, the wife, walks in and tells Darian to go to her bed. So then Joe and Sarah sort of stare at each other, and Sarah leaves without saying anything else. So now, Jimmy helps himself to a drink from the bar, admires this photo of Joe with like this fake ass Jimmy Carter.
It clearly wasn't Jimmy Carter.
No, but it was like a lookalike. I think it was definitely meant to be Jimmy Carter.
Absolutely.
I couldn't tell what he was drinking. It seemed like a bottle of like Jose Cuervo.
Yeah, it did just seem like tequila, or just like straight tequila.
And Joe, he's like, oh man, it's like a picture of you with the man.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I used to be a regular Boy Scout.
So close. So close, but it's not quite there.
And then Jimmy is like, is that like a picture with the cardboard cutout? He's like, I had a picture of myself taken with Don Johnson like that. And I love that because then Joe's like, do you still have the picture? And he's like, nah, I threw it away. It was such a random little like thing. It slayed me. So then Jimmy asked Joe, are you going to get a divorce? And Joe says, Sarah, he's like saying, well, Sarah's been fucking my best friend.
Yeah.
Whatever. And Jimmy's like, yeah, that guy was a scumbag. He tried to get you killed. And that's when Joe was like, well, all private eyes are scumbags.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's like kind of the trope. Yeah.
And Joe says, I wish the sky wasn't blue. I wish water wasn't wet. And I wish I didn't still love my wife. It's like, oh, Joe is like he's a wife
one,
guy.
Man. Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah.
So then Jimmy offers up this toast to Alex, the accountant. And Joe's confused, and Jimmy says, Alex was my son. So finally we're getting the payoff.
Right.
It's like the rule of three. We've hit the third time. It's time to pay it off. And Jimmy shares this story about how, I was married before. My wife was 8 months pregnant. I was out of town playing in a football game. She wasn't with me, and a car jumped the curb and hit her. And she died right away. They delivered the baby, and the baby lived for 17 minutes before it died. And yeah, he's like saying, I played the best game of my life that day. It's like, fuck, that's some fucked up shit. Yeah. Brutal story. And Damon Wayans was acting his ass off.
Yeah, and it's good. And this is the classic, like the heroes bonding over tragedy scene too, right? But it felt real. Like, I mean, he pulled it off. Like for someone who,
good.
Yeah.
For like a guy who's a stand-up comic or whatever, and a guy in Living Color.
Right. Yeah, he really did a good job with that scene.
I would say a little bit later, we're going to find out Joe is a pretty big football fan.
Yeah.
And I feel like you would know this.
Yeah. Oh,
this would be a story
news.
that made big news. His wife got hit by like a driver and killed, and she was pregnant.
This would definitely be like on a VH1 behind the music style documentary.
Yeah.
Right? Or like on ESPN. ESPN was around in the 90s, right?
Absolutely,
like this would absolutely have been something that was played over and over on ESPN.
Especially locally, it would be a huge story in the town.
Yeah. And I think that might be the biggest sort of hole in the entire continuity of this plot is the idea that Joe, as a big football fan, doesn't know, because he's not just a big football fan. We'll find, I'm spoiling a little bit later.
Jimmy was his favorite player.
Right. So,
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So, anyway.
But yeah, so basically the summary is life sucks, right?
Yeah.
So Jimmy asks, you got a shower here? I can get cleaned up. And Joe points him towards the bathroom. So then we see, though, that Jimmy is secretly getting ready to snort some cocaine in the bathroom. And Joe comes in with a towel and catches Jimmy in the act. And Joe punches Jimmy in the face. He grabs his bag of drugs. He says, I guess this is what you were really looking for in Corey's apartment. So he throws the drugs in the toilet, flushes them. He tells Jimmy, get out of my house. Jimmy's like, I need the drugs to get by. And Joe's like, I get by without them. Like, but do you really?
Do you really? Yeah. We haven't seen you without a cigarette in your hand this entire movie.
I don't know. Is what you're doing right now qualify as getting by? I don't know. But so Jimmy then goes on this rant about how, basically I got addicted to painkillers as a football player.
I mean, true facts. Like this happens.
And he's like, one day you're on top of the world, then you get hooked on painkillers and your wife and son get killed. And then you get a call from the league telling you you're kicked out because you're gambling.
Yeah.
It's another strong monologue from like a novice actor.
Yeah.
And like, especially when you're having to like deliver exposition, that's never easy.
And
but he's like doing good.
And this is all on him too, right? Like Willis doesn't have hardly any lines of dialogue in either of these scenes. I mean, when he got the sides for that day, I mean, it's just his words on the entire page, right?
Absolutely, man. So he says, basically pro football, is catered to gambling, and they push the players until they blow their brains out, just like Billy Cole did in the beginning part of the movie.
Yeah.
He's like, can't you see these hypocrites took away my fucking life? And then Joe, heartless, is like, well, whenever you're done feeling sorry for yourself, you can leave. Yeah, pretty heartless.
Old man.
So that's when Jimmy's like, you bastard. And then he's like, and then some. So that's number two.
Call back to number two.
Number two, yeah. Now, as Jimmy's leaving the house, Darian is for some reason outside on the front porch waiting for him. No idea what the fuck she's doing out there.
Just as an excuse to say the next line of dialogue.
Yeah. So she's like, will you sign my football card? It says, you were Joe's favorite player. And then she says, Joe used to talk about, how great Jimmy is all the time. Like, he quit watching football when you got kicked out. And it's like, oh, man, like, I like that. It's also weird now as an older guy to, like, have favorite football players who are a lot younger than you are. It's like, it makes you feel really old. But anyway.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, Jimmy is like, does he punch all his heroes? He says, and like had signed her card and walks away. She looks down at the football card and she had signed it to the daughter of the last Boy Scout.
Good enough.
I know. Does that count? Like, as mentioning the title of the movie?
It counts.
Okay.
Drink.
And the close-up shot of the football card is the one and only time that they snuck the NFL logo into the movie. It was on the football card.
Wow. And I read this, so it doesn't surprise me, and that might have actually been a gaffe, because they hired one of the premier sports card manufacturers to do a custom card just for this movie featuring Damon Wayans as the player.
Right. It was like the template of a real NFL card or something.
Exactly. So they used a template of a real NFL card, and I think that's how the NFL logo snuck in there.
It was on screen so briefly it probably flew under the radar or whatever, but it also was like, oh boy, the NFL will come at you for that.
I mean, I feel like in '91 they were probably okay with it, because it's like no one is going to be able to freeze a single frame, and then now we live in the future, and
everything's like HD, and it's like, was that an NFL logo I saw? Call the lawyers. But I think that's what we'll leave it for this time. Another brisk chapter.
I know, and it was we're
like
moving
this
into,
movie, man.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
It keeps it moving. Like, the plot is compelling.
The characters are interesting.
Absolutely.
Sassy daughters.
What's crazy, I mean, we'll finally start to meet our bad guys.
I know.
But like, we've barely had any encounters with the bad guys this whole movie. Like, it's being carried by our good guys.
And they're carrying it amazingly. I can't believe. It sucks that Damon Wayans and Bruce Willis didn't do another movie together, because they have really strong chemistry.
Well, I'm sure touched on it later. It feels like the movie was begging to be like the first chapter of a franchise.
Yeah, because they start. Well, I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah, they talk about it later. But no, it does. Yeah, these guys are great. The characters are entertaining. Yeah,
Damon Wayans.
I'm here for it.
Top of his talent. Bruce Willis at the top of his career.
Yeah, dude, this is like awesome stuff all around.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll be back with a lot more on The Last Boy Scout next week, dear listeners.
Yeah. Until then,
we'll be back.